20 million people live here at the mouth of the Yangtze River, in Shanghai, the city that is the pulse of China's economy.
This is the most dynamic place I've ever lived. And it could be the model for the world, or it could be a disaster.
Shanghai is to China what New York is to America, a symbol of success and a warning about the price that may have to be paid.
China isn't just an economic superpower these days, it's a greenhouse gas superpower too. China's now overtaken the US as the principal producer of greenhouse gas emissions.
Shanghai is already beginning to suffer environmental consequences.
台风增多一些龙卷风冰雹甚至一些标线大风等强烈天气都非常的多。
Shanghai could end up underwater. Sea levels are rising, and the city is sinking.
没有对这个未来的这个预测的话，那个每年下沉1.5厘米。
Reducing greenhouse gas emissions will not be enough. China and the rest of the world needs to invest in adapting to climate change.
Without adequate adaptation, there will be probably tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people additionally at risk.
But what can be done to avert the danger, and how much will it cost?
The question, can we afford to deal with climate change, is the wrong question. We can't afford not to. It's adapt or die.
Shanghai is China's gateway to the West. It was East Asia's most important business city before the Second World War. But after the communists took over in 1949, it was deliberately run down. In 1990, that policy was reversed, and the city is booming again. Pudong, the financial center, has all been built in the last 20 years. It has become the hub of one of the fastest economic expansions the world has ever seen. Its success makes the city a driver of climate change. But its low-lying position near the coast means it's also a potential victim. The cost of climate change for China could be the loss of its East Coast industry because of flooding from sea level rises. Yangshan Port, just south of Shanghai, estimated to have cost $12 billion, is just one example of what is at risk.
There are two main ways in which we can combat climate change. One is by reducing emissions of carbon dioxide. We generally call that mitigation. And the other is adapting to the climate changes which are occurring now and will continue to occur and accelerate even if we take the strongest mitigation we can.
China is rich enough to do both. 1,600 kilometers upstream from Shanghai, the newly built Three Gorges Dam helps control the Yangtze River from flooding. It cost $30 billion. But adapting to climate change doesn't always have to be quite so high-tech and expensive. In Surat, a city on the west coast of India, the world's other massive developing economic powerhouse, there is a different low-cost approach.
कीमती चीज कागज पत्र घर की फाइल हो ऐसी चीज हम ऊपर रख देते हैं.
New buildings have empty ground floors. In old buildings, upper floors are being added. And the infrastructure is being adapted to keep the city functioning even when it's flooded. Although the figure is rising, India causes only 5% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. China is already responsible for 25%.
China's emissions are growing at around about 10% a year, maybe slightly faster than that. At that rate, they will more than double in a decade. So they're growing much faster than the US. The US is growing 1 to 2% a year. So they're growing almost 10 times the rate of the US at the moment.
China's economy is growing in tandem with massive urbanization. By 2030, 2/3 of China's 1.5 billion people will live in urban areas. In less than 20 years, Shanghai's population has grown by 25%. Hidden in the shadow of Shanghai's new high-rise residential blocks are the homes of many poorer migrants hoping to find a better life. 5 a.m., time for 40-year-old Zhao Wenguan to start his day. He and his wife moved to Shanghai 4 years ago. He was a farmer and a part-time teacher in a village 700 kilometers from Shanghai. He moved here so he could afford the education he wanted for his children. When his children are in the city, they share a room with their parents.
当初来上海的时候是随着这个就是外交人员嘛，就是想出外打工啊。
Mr. Zhao earns his living recycling waste. He uses a tricycle to collect it. He's able to scrape a living as a recycler because Shanghai is at the heart of China's consumer revolution.
Chanel 啊 ，LV 啊，都觉得还可以，包包啊，或者是衣服啊、化妆品啊 ，LV、GUCCI、Burberry。
阿玛尼啊，像运动品牌基本上也很大陆啊，比如说耐克啊、阿迪啊这种，普拉达啊。
Environmental consultant David Sutton worked for a research institute advising the American government. He left the USA 7 years ago to live in Shanghai.
The Chinese have a very healthy attitude by saving much of the money they have. What money they spend on the essentials of living, and ultimately, when they have enough, a home. There is a rising middle class in Shanghai particularly that's chasing the American dream.
因为现在很多新的东西出来都设计得很漂亮，所以应该逛街的次数会更多，所以消费就会多。
The American dream is going after brand names, status by virtue of the fact that you have what others don't have, buying it whether you have the money or not on credit.
因为我一般就说，我觉得这件衣服好看的，我就会去买，而不会去考虑它价钱有多少或者怎么样的。
Fashion is just the tip of the iceberg in China's consumer revolution. It is the sale of fridges, washing machines, tumble dryers and air conditioners that's leading to a huge increase in electricity use and produces greenhouse gases.
If China's 1.5 billion people were to consume at the level of the West, there wouldn't be enough resources. It would take 3 planets, and certainly all the oil the world's ever seen, to do that. China cannot follow the model of the West. It can't be done.
People need to adapt their behavior. Ending the throwaway culture would be a good start.
I love to see these recyclers on their bicycles and their little baskets going around picking up things that normally would go in the trash bin, because it represents a value we should never lose, that we can find a way to use most of what we end up throwing away.
China has around 20 million private recyclers like Mr. Zhao. Over 4 years, he has cultivated several regular customers, like this pharmacy. Mr. Zhao buys their spare cardboard boxes. His payment is based on their weight. Mr. Zhao's profit on this transaction will be about 15 cents.
我每天要干这个10多个小时，早上反正天一亮就起来，晚上就是天黑了再回来，就是每天基本上是可以挣到50块钱。就是说一个星期当中没有休息天，就是每天都在干，就是每天都在干这个活。
Before the credit crunch, he used to earn $15 a day, double his current earnings. Rent, water and electricity bills consume most of his earnings. But because his wife also works, the family just about survives. A car would make his job much easier.
是有点内心深处是有点羡慕，马路上好多汽车，看人家开到多么潇洒，是心里有点羡慕。我就是因为骑这个三轮车是比较辛苦的，要费好大劲。我有时候想买一个便宜一点的这个汽车，来代替这个三轮车。 有这个想法，但是暂时是实现不了，但是经济问题。
China has many people like Mr. Zhao, desperate to exchange their bicycles and motorbikes for cars. Although Shanghai is packed with cars, in China as a whole, there are currently only 4 cars per 100 people, compared to 80 per 100 in the USA. Which is great news for Chinese car manufacturers like Geely, the largest privately owned company in the country.
Our domestic sales have gone up a lot, roughly about 50 or more than 50%. This year, everybody's trying to put a guess whether the volume will be around 2020